Welcome back to Cornstalks and Sports Talk here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com with me, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. A few weeks ago, we had Nick Osen, Iowa State beat writer for 247 Sports on the show to talk the possibility of AJ Green becoming a Cyclone, and to damn near everyone's surprise, including ours, AJ decided to keep his name in the NBA draft. So the outlook for ISU basketball is a bit different now. And to talk with us a little bit about the decision for AJ Green and the outlook for Cyclone basketball, Nick is joining us again. Nick, you and I both surprised AJ's decision. How taken aback were you when it was announced that he'd be sticking in the draft?
I would say when it officially kind of came out, and we were texting about it late that night, kind of how things were feeling. I would say at that moment, a little surprised. Earlier in the day when I started to, hear and quite honestly just get the feeling that it wasn't quite as likely he was coming to Iowa State, started to get a little bit more surprised. And it's no, offense to the Cyclones or AJ or anything, because I told you I watched him in the G League, elite camp, and I was impressed. But he didn't get, that call up to the combine, and then there didn't seem to be quite as much momentum that second week. So I would say it was a little bit of surprise, but just based on kind of who I was speaking with, and how hard I was working that story when it officially dropped, I was not shocked. But kind of with the momentum, it was a little surprising he's not going to be playing here in Ames.
From our last conversation to this one, like it just, if we were able to know what was going on, I like our face-to-face conversation, well, via Zoom, I think we both would have been just shook. The next time I was talking with you, I was thinking, yeah, AJ Green is going to be a Cyclone. So pretty heavy changes. I remember when the news dropped, prior to the news drop, you texted me and asked me, are you hearing anything? And then like 2 hours later, I responded after AJ had decided, and I was like, yes. I'm just, this by now, I'm not the greatest texter in the world, but anyway, so he had some workouts and everything with NBA teams. I'm assuming now, where we're looking at it, he had to have gotten some sort of guarantee, right? With like with a two-way, or that they draft him. I mean, again, this is all speculation from us, but you'd think that something really came forward with what happened in those final workouts, because apparently something changed.
Yeah, a little bit of speculation, but I heard from somebody that I've kind of trusted throughout this process. Obviously another kind of extensive time period with the Bucks kind of spoke to something that was certainly, interesting when that came out. And then I also heard about another Eastern Conference team, potentially the Hawks, at least showing some type of interest. So I think that a few teams, in that conference obviously showed the most interest. The last couple of workouts were in the East as well, including the Pacers. But yeah, I mean, truly like fully good for AJ. That is really impressive. And I hope that, it works out well for him. And there is some type of a guarantee or a, soft landing spot, taking a move and kind of a jump like this.
And we talked about it with Coach Jake last weekend. Iowa State's had their share of guys go to the NBA. UNI hasn't. And this is huge for recruiting for UNI, especially going forward. I mean, I talked about it a few weeks ago, too, on Cornstalks and Sports Talk. Was you look at the roster picture at the beginning of the season for UNI basketball, not only is Goner Mar out, he didn't even play at the beginning of the season due to the just injuries that surmounted for him. AJ Green's gone. Noah Carter's gone. Antoine Kimmons is gone. The possibility of Austin Fife was being gone at that point in time was still on the table. And then you got Trey Burhout and Taiwan Pickford graduating. So there's spots to fill. There's spots to fill. And so having a guy who's going into the NBA draft is huge for a mid-major program like UNI.
Yeah, I can imagine it. And, I'll kind of, take on your role and throw a question back on you, because I watched UNI. Obviously, we've talked about, some of their tourney runs and a lot of their success. Have they had a player like really drafted or land on an NBA team?
They've never had a player drafted. They've had a few guys in the G League that played particularly well. Jeremy Morgan, again, we talked about this last week with Coach Jake. If you want to listen to the podcast from last week, to people who are listening, Jeremy Morgan's playing really well overseas right now. Wes Washpun, he played for the Iowa Wolves, believe it or not, in the G League. Seth Tuttle went through the draft process a few years ago, never landed. I tell this to everybody, if Seth Tuttle was picked up by the San Antonio Spurs, he would have had at least a few years in the league, and I'm sticking to it. I haven't told that to Tut specifically. I'm sure I will at some point, but no real run in the NBA. The NFL has been, and football has been much more what UNI is known for, and particularly putting guys into the professional ranks. But AJ will be the first one, and it's kind of been that trajectory since he came to UNI. I mean, 4-star recruit out of high school, and so it's really big for the program in Cedar Falls for sure.
Oh, that's really impressive. Like I said, I'm really excited to see kind of how things play out. It seems like just an awesome kid, and obviously a terrific player that's not afraid to bet on himself. You have to respect that.
Oh, definitely. And I don't know that you got the opportunity to talk to AJ specifically at all, but yeah, he's a great kid and very humble, and very excited to see what's ahead of him. But we are here to talk a little bit about Iowa State basketball too. In regards to the Cyclones, we've talked about a few of their transfers that are coming in: Oshun Oshuniyi, Jaron Holmes, Jeremiah Williams, kid from VCU, and of course last year's guys, Cal Schuer and Kuntz. Without AJ coming in, I think a lot of people would agree that the ceiling isn't quite as high. They don't have that type of prolific scorer that you'd want on your team. But at the same time, quality players, like all those guys that I just mentioned, are they're going to be able to hold their own in the Big 12. So where are your expectations now versus when you thought AJ was going to be a Cyclone?
Yeah, so they've, there's no real hiding it. The expectations have certainly fallen a little bit. I mean, with AJ Green and the other transfers and some of the progress of, other guys on the team like Kuntz or Gabe Kalsher, I would have pegged Iowa State as a top 4 or 5 team in the Big 12, maybe top 6, because the conference has only gotten stronger. Now, because of some of the returners and a really good staff, I think you have to have somewhat of a semblance of expectations to fight for an NCAA tournament berth, which I don't think is out of the question, just because of, easy spots to win in non-conference, places to get really high quality wins, and the way that this team is going to play. I mean, they're likely to feed off of the defense again. I think that there is a lot of collective talent, but they don't have that go-to scorer or even necessarily a clear-cut best player. I think that some fair expectations for me, and I'm not really shy of wanting to be able to cover postseason tournaments as, a growing reporter, I'll say that. I think that it's kind of to fight around the same number of Big 12 wins as this year. I mean, they were only 7-11, but then they got kind of a good draw in the tournament and obviously got to the Sweet 16. So I think to finish top 7 in the Big 12 would be pretty good, because it gives you that chance. I think 8 wins in conference would be huge with this roster. And I think to get to the NCAA tournament would be a major success.
Now, I think this is the magic question for this team. And again, we're talking with Nick Osen of 247Sports. He's the Iowa State beat reporter for them here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. The magic question: who's going to lead this team in scoring?
Really, really good question. I don't think it's going to be a wide margin. I think they're going to have pretty close kind of margins or differentials there. Man, I think as of this moment, I'm going to give 2 names. I will say Gabe Kalsher or Oshun Oshuniyi. I think that if he can build on the success that he had at St. Bonaventures, I think there's a chance for him to be kind of a major point of this offense. It's far from a guarantee. There are a lot of options at guard, but no clear-cut, scorers or shooters, like you said. I think it's going to be a team that really comes together. Maybe several guys in the 9 to 11 points per game range, which you can win with. And then just quite honestly, the talent level on defense is actually really impressive, especially when you factor in Oshun and Hassan Ward, the player from VCU, and Kalsher's back, and Jeremiah Williams. If you're into that old school basketball, lock it down and, force the other team to kind of beat your hand, you're going to enjoy watching the Cyclones team. If you like high scoring, this likely isn't necessarily the team for you this year.
I don't know if we've talked about this. I grew up a San Diego Chargers fan. Now, of course, Los Angeles Chargers. The one thing that I remember hearing about, I think it was the 80s Chargers with Dan Fouts, was that, they'd go out and score 56 points, but the team that they'd lose to would score 58 because their defense was so bad. It's the reverse. It's the reverse for the Cyclones. So it's just, how are they going to score the basketball? Like, just to hammer that point home. I mean, they don't have that. They don't have Isaiah Brockington, right? And they don't have Tyrese Hunter even, who's a fantastic player, not necessarily your go-to scorer, but a fantastic player. So, I mean, they're going to have to get out and run, right? I think having Oshun as a lob threat is going to be big in that aspect of the game. But also, I know he's going to have to develop a level of a jump shot to make it in the league, right? Into the NBA. And now with AJ deciding to go to the pros, you'd think that just got hammered home to him by the coaching staff.
Yeah, I think these guys know that there's kind of an extra level of an onus or a responsibility on their shoulders now, because I'm not convinced there is going to be like a late, summer, I guess we're already into, pickup that's really going to change things with this roster. I mean, unbelievably, we're sitting at mid-June. There aren't a ton of highly sought-after, talented players left in the transfer portal. But again, I haven't been shy saying it on this show or other shows I've been on. I'm really impressed with this staff, not only in terms of buy-in, but in getting the absolute most potential out of your players. So I will not be one to count this team out after what I saw last year with what they did with that roster, and then hitting an absolute low point, coming back up 4 conference wins in a row, then knocking off Wisconsin to get to the Sweet 16 and play a really good half against Miami. So, yeah, expectations may be tempered, but what I would say is I won't be losing any expectations either. This team still has to fight for a tournament berth based on kind of the trajectory of the program.
Now, is there any chance they take that scholarship and just find somebody who's, hey, you're a shooter, you can come in for a year, and maybe it's a grad transfer that's still on the market, and say, hey, you might have a shot. Here's a scholarship,
Yeah, I think there was that point to look at a couple potential guys that can do a little more than just shooting, maybe scoring the ball at a high clip or being a facilitator. But at this point, I'd say more likely than not, they just won't be doing that. I mean, you look at the top 100, 150 names in the transfer portal, and just about everyone's taken. And I said it, right on my board after the AJ news became official, said I don't expect this staff to use a scholarship just to use it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And there are a couple of names that came to mind. What if Austin Ash flipped from the Hawkeyes to the Cyclones? Even like if you recognize that name, even because I know you're fairly new, but riding the bench for the Hawkeyes for 5 years, trying to get a spot somewhere. But another name that you may very well not recognize because he's in the Missouri Valley Conference, just committed to Missouri, Isaiah Mosley. Like if he ended up with the Cyclones, like, oh wow, they could have hit the freaking jackpot if that happened.
Don't tempt me now, my friend. What if on the basketball court? No, that would have been a pretty terrific fit, but I think that was kind of an interesting recruitment. I don't know a ton about it, but I wasn't really shocked to see him staying a little bit closer to home there as well.
Right. Anywho, he is Nick Osen from the 247 Sports. He covers the Iowa State Cyclones for them at The Real Nick Osen on Twitter. Give him a follow. This guy works so hard. He does great stuff, and he's always willing to hop on, even if he only has 15 to 20 minutes. Nick, we appreciate you, brother.
You're one of those people I'll always make the time for, my guy. Thank you so much.